Luminary presents Therapy versus the World. I'm your host, Joe Nucci, and today I talk to Therapy Jeff. Therapy Jeff, who you may know from his social media, is a licensed and practicing psychotherapist who studied at the University of Southern California, Phi. He lives in Portland, Oregon, where he maintains a private practice and makes really wonderful, relatable content about your relationships. We talked about Jeff's upcoming book, Big Dating Energy. He also has a podcast that goes by the same name, as well as another podcast called Problem Solved, where he helps people just like you think about their relationship issues. We talked about everything from dating apps to social norms to how to break up with someone responsibly and so much more. I love talking to him, so I know you're going to love listening to it. Before we begin, if you wouldn't mind hitting that like or subscribe button as we get started, we'd really, really appreciate it. Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very excited to talk to you. Long before I even thought creating content or anything like that was a dream, I did follow you, and I remember thinking, man, this guy is so good with his lists. and I don't know how much of my content you've seen, but I know that I'm not afraid to kind of, criticize, people that I think are being kind of irresponsible with their framing or their language. And I've always enjoyed your lists for what it's worth. And so always been a big fan.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a big fan of lists too. Even before I started posting as Therapy Jeff, I kind of got into creating content by blogging and creating a newsletter and a mailing list and stuff like that. And that's when I really got into creating content that had really digestible, listy sort of formats, and it's followed me into the Therapy Jeff realm. However, I have gotten criticism for my lists, as maybe you might imagine, but sometimes that the list format comes off as pop psychology, which I'm trying not to be, but I think that it's we're making content that maybe is only 60 to 90 seconds on Instagram or TikTok or something. It's going to come off a little poppy, but hopefully lead people to podcasts like this where you can really get into the nuance and the gray areas. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Well, all of the intention and work you've put in definitely shows, and it's actually culminated in a book, Big Dating Energy, which is also the name of your podcast, right? Or one of your podcasts.
That's right. Yeah. That's my favorite part, or one of my favorite things that's come from posting content regularly and creating a big platform and following is that I got the opportunity to write this book. And just today, actually, a few hours ago, I completed recording the audio version of my book. So it's very fresh in my mind, and I'm also kind of sick of it because this is the 15th to 20th time I've read it, but it was the first time that I've read it out loud from start to finish. I'm not sick of it because it's a bad book. It's wonderful. It's hilarious, but it's just I've been talking about it a lot.
All right. Well, for the rest of the podcast, I'd like you to recite your favorite parts of the book from memory, please.
You know what the trickiest part of reading the audio version is that I think that there's some really good jokes. There's a lot of levity in my writing, but sometimes a joke is better on paper than it is out loud. Because you also have to kind of think about the timing and the delivery and how you say it, and it just doesn't really transfer. Mm-hmm.
All right, duly noted. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about the book? I'm curious why this book, why this topic, and you can feel free to kind of tie in some of your history to it. I know you talk a lot about relationships in your content, and you also have a podcast that has predated the release of this book. So just give us a little background.
Sure. So I started posting. So back during the pandemic in September of 2021, I got real bored. Well, at the beginning of the pandemic, I decided to watch all 40 seasons of Survivor. Have you watched all 40 seasons of Survivor?
I can't say I have, but I have seen the show.
It's a journey, my guy. And I recommend anybody to go on it. I think they're on season 46 right now, and I am hooked. And if like ABC is listening to our podcast, then you should cast me on the 47th season of Survivor.
Here's
But
hoping.
yeah. Although, scratch that, because basically Survivor, all Survivor is camping, and I can't stand camping. Camping's the absolute worst. I don't even know if I would do it for 29 days and a shot at $1 million. So I'm actually on the fence about it. But after I watched all 40 seasons of Survivor, I was like, I need to do something more creative. Mental health and therapy was trending on TikTok. We were all home, like scrolling on TikTok, and I saw these therapists creating content, and I was like, I think I could do that. I think I might want to try doing that. And it was like my fourth video that went viral. That video was about something like 5 questions you should ask your therapist the next time you have a session. And a lot of people were like, I can ask my therapist questions? Are you serious? And so that went viral, and then more videos started to go viral, and then I like built a whole following, and it was really fun. But most of my content has been based on like relationship advice, because I've been a therapist for 20 years now, and I just sort of naturally fell into mostly treating folks that feel really anxious in relationships. So like the classic anxious attachment style, or worries that you might be codependent, or you're feeling too clingy or needy, or whatever you want to call it. So those are the clients that I typically treat. I also see couples for couples counseling, but only like couples that are still in love. That's my rule. Like, I don't want to see couples that have been together for like 30 years and haven't had sex for the last 10 and haven't talked to each other for the last 3. It's just like bad vibes, babe. Go find a therapist that like really wants to get into it. You know what I mean? Do you feel that way?
Feel free to send them my way, because I find your version of couples totally boring to work with. I'm like, give me the car crash victim.
No.
I don't want to stitch a simple cut. I want to be in the OR all day.
Yeah. Those couples will sometimes find their way into my office, and I'm like, fine. I can only do like 1 or 2 or 3 of you at a time. But if my full caseload is all of you, it's just like, this is way too heavy. And couples counseling is fun. It's never boring, but there's a lot to manage in those sessions, right?
Totally. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's funny, because I know I had a supervisor in grad school who was like, oh, you couldn't pay me to treat couples. And I ended up feeling really drawn to the work. And I don't know if it's like the ADHD part of my brain, or just like the general kind of like variety seeking, but I love how there's just another being in the room to manage, and it just kind of sucks me in. My couple sessions are always 90 minutes. I don't see them for any less than that. And there are days where I sit down and I go, what are we going to talk about for 90 minutes? And then it's never enough time as soon as we get into it. And so I don't know. It keeps me focused.
Oh my God. I don't know if there's ever been a couples session where I've ended it without saying like, so we're going to have to pause here and pick up next time at the same place. It's always like, there's never enough time. So I see a lot of couples that are like in the early stages of dating, or just married, or premarital stuff, real cute couples that have lots of optimism for the future. But I also see a lot of individuals, like I was saying, folks that are feeling like anxious in their relationships. And so I started to create content, and I started talking a lot about dating and relationships, and I just kind of leaned into that. And there was a lot of, then finally, like literary agents were reaching out to me. They're like, oh, look at your platform. Do you want to write a book? And I was like, yeah, fuck it. Let's see if I can actually write a book. And so I decided to just stick with what I talk about online, which is, relationship and dating advice. I usually kind of like lean towards early dating advice, but I'll also talk about like long-term relationship success. Sometimes I like to talk about conflict or sexy problems, honeymoon phase, how to get through it, how to let it go, how to have like good, healthy fights, or, at least win all the fights, right? That sort of thing. And I turned it into a book, and it turned out that like when I wrote this book, and I tried to kind of like divide it into a few different parts. And the first part was like who can we blame for all of your relationship problems? And I love to blame people. So we get to like blame your parents for fucking you up. We can blame Hollywood. We can blame the culture. We can blame dating apps. We can blame reality shows. Like all these sort of like toxic messages you were given, even from like toxic monogamy, stuff like this, the relationship escalator, whatever. And then it eventually goes into like, well, how can you like own these problems, take responsibility for the issues, and see how maybe you're like attracting partners or reinforcing them in your relationship? What can you do there? And then it goes into like first dates, getting on the apps, going through the honeymoon stage, creating like longer term relationships if that's what you're looking for. It goes into like how to be an ethical breaker upper. And then eventually get back out there if that's what you want to do. So it was a really fun book to write. And it turned out that like each chapter that I wrote, I was like, each chapter could be its own book. There's just like so much to say on all the topics. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's go through each of those sections one at a time. Let's start broad. I'm curious, who have been your greatest sources of inspiration for couples work, for working with people through relationships, whether it's someone in your personal life or maybe like a thinker that other people might know or a researcher? Where have you like who do you look to?
I mean, there's, you know, the basics, like the Gottmans, right? I think that like we all love the Gottmans. I wish the Gottmans would adopt me. If they're listening, I wish you were my mom and dad. Do you ever got that feeling from the Gottmans?
I am level 2 trained, and I can also report having that fantasy.
Yeah. They're just such sweeties, and I like their research-backed sort of thing. And they're also like so accessible, right? You know, like very practical. They have a fun love lab, right? Where they like predict with, what is it, over 90% or 95% accuracy or whatever it is, like whether or not you're going to be able to stay together. Yeah. So they're like, I love their really practical tools and how accessible they are. I'm probably a Sue Johnson fan. I like emotionally focused couples therapy. And I feel like that's what a lot of my couples therapy kind of like defaults to is how can we understand our partner's emotional experience and create like a secure connection. And a secure attachment. And even if you come in with, you know, it's trendy online on TikTok or Instagram to talk about attachment styles. And so I can also like start there with folks. And that's kind of like an easy way to understand why you are the way you are or how you act. But I usually look at attachment styles as somewhat of a spectrum that we maybe go up and down on depending on life and stressors or the people that we're in relationships with. I'm blanking on that one guy. Who's that guy? Terry Real. What do you think of that guy?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
I think he's the one that wrote, is he the one that wrote I Don't Want to Talk About It? Or is that somebody else?
He did. Yeah, he wrote that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was my introduction to him, and I've read some of his stuff on because he's very relational in his vibe.
He's got a relational vibe for sure. He also like, I think he likes to talk to couples where there's like maybe a narcissist in the relationship. And I think he, you know, I think we like use that term narcissist kind of loosely in like a pop psychology sort of way. I think he just likes really grandiose men. I think he loves to challenge men who think that they're right all the time. And I think that's because he thinks he's right all the time. And I say that like in an endearing way because like sometimes that's the energy. It feels a little bit about like, and I'm not going to talk shit about like our legend Esther Perel. Like she's amazing, but she also has like a little bit of that, like, I don't think she's a narcissist, but she's got that like narcissist energy, like the good kind, where she's like, I'll go fucking toe to toe with anybody. You want to do? She's so commanding, and I love to see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
what do you think about this? I was, before we got on here, I was just shooting some short form content. So it's just top of mind, recency effect. And I remember thinking about how there's kind of like the grandiose coping style versus the insecure. And I've been thinking about narcissism and how the concept of it seems to kind of take in culture by force in some ways. And I was thinking a lot about, in some of the content, about grandiose coping styles, because my coping style leans grandiose. I wouldn't identify as a narcissist. I mean, I think that if I could invite my personal therapist on and you ask them if they ever thought Joe was a narcissist, they would laugh at your face. You know? But I think that particularly in media, or when you have a brand, like, as you know, like, you get a lot of love, but you also get a lot of hate. And I personally have been thankful for how my coping style to stress or insecurity almost leans a little bit grandiose, because I mean, I don't know if you've looked at comment sections lately or if you read your own, but they can be brutal, man. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh my gosh. So I kind of humorously, to anyone, therapist or not, with a media presence, if you don't have a grandiose coping style or a grandiose response to stress, like, are you okay? You know what I mean? And so I guess I share that to say that, like, is it like I'm not saying that they don't have that energy that you're talking about, but I'm kind of more just saying, like, but wouldn't you have to? Like, you know what I mean? So I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, now that I think about it, if you're going to be a therapist that has any sort of like public persona and you're going to put yourself out there, like, you're going to get criticized. People are not going to agree with you. And we all have such strong feelings about relationships and what's wrong and right and what's ethical and not and all this. So like, you're going to be, so yeah, I mean, I have comment sections and typically try to like never read the comments, but I read lots of them. Like, it's hard not to. So there is like a defense mechanism that has to go up. And in the first year of like posting content as Therapy Jeff, I was like, I made the decision that I'm not going to try to make this into a business until I go past a year. I'm not going to try to monetize this because I want to see how I respond to the comment section and to criticism. And I think the first 6 months, I was not responding well. Like responding internally well, like I was like taking any little bits of criticism to heart. I was feeling like I was hurting too many people's feelings. I felt like really misunderstood sometimes. It felt like, I couldn't, there was this time, I don't know if you've ever done this. I don't recommend you or anyone ever doing this, but, there was a point where I was like, oh, I think there's some people out there that are not Therapy Jeff fans, and I want to find every single non-Therapy Jeff fan ever. And so I was like scraping the internet, trying to find as much criticism about myself as I possibly could, because it was such a weird, I was like, if somebody doesn't like me and they're going to be honest about why they don't like me, that's really interesting information. Like, I want to know what that is. I'm just incredibly curious. It turned out that's not a really great thing to do, actually. Like, it can really fuck with your self-esteem, apparently. Which I should have known this. I'm a therapist. But, like, the curiosity got a hold of me. And then I had to, like, 6 months in, figure out, like, what am I going to do? If I'm going to continue doing this, then how can I cope with it, right? A really like good practical way to cope with a comment section that maybe is a little upsetting is to like send a friend, a therapist friend or two, into the comment section to check it out and be like, is this something I should respond to, or are these things I should ignore because they're criticizing my hand gestures or my eyebrows don't look good enough or whatever. I have since fixed my eyebrows. They looked horrible before, but now they're beautiful, as you can see. But I don't know if it was a conscious decision, but it was eventually like I created this sort of grandiose coping mechanism of just like, you know what? I think I'm pretty fucking great. And I get like 99% of the feedback I get is like really lovely, validating, encouraging feedback. And I think they're right. I think I'm doing a real service here. So I'm going to keep on doing what I'm doing. So I get it. I get what you're saying, is what I'm saying. And I understand why Terry Real or Esther Perel maybe have like a grandiose energy about them.
Yeah, totally. And so when you started thinking about the book, I was struck by how each of the chapters, whether it's like, the ethically breaking up with someone or putting yourself out there, do you think that these are things that you see both clinically, personally, but also on social media? Like, are these the things that people are grappling with right now?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's also, it's funny. I mean, there's lots of basic stuff that people are struggling with that maybe we've always struggled with all the time. But there's a lot of questions out there of like, how do I flirt with someone? I don't know how to do it. Or if I'm going to meet somebody off of the apps, where do I even start? Or how can I approach somebody without them feeling like I'm being unsafe? Or, there's a lot of, it's really difficult to figure out how to meet somebody in a way that feels good. And I think that like as time goes on, we're trusting the dating apps less and less and less. And the generation that I see that is stuck on the dating apps are millennials. Like the dating apps were made when the millennials were getting out there to date. We all thought it was like a really cool thing. And now like millennials are still the ones that are driving the dating apps because when they go on their phone, they want to go to an app that feels like, oh, this is the okay, safe, expected place to date and flirt and meet people. And it's interesting because like the Gen Z kids, they're not using the dating apps as much. They're actually like meeting people in other places on the internet, whether it's on Reddit or Discord or Fortnite. Like they're just sort of like going for it. But they also like are having a lot of questions about like just how to meet people, how to flirt with people, and how to connect romantically. So yeah, I did take a lot of the content that I created for the book from like the actual comment section and questions that I get through my DMs.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I'm a millennial. I've used apps, and I have also maybe over the last year started to really like shift how I approach them. They're a tool I still want to use. I think particularly like as a member of the queer community, it's like this is a great way to connect and meet with other people regardless, right? And so there is a lot of great functionality there, but it's for me, it's been so helpful to just constantly keep top of mind. It's like the point of the way this is designed is to keep me looking at it. Like, how do I beat it? Like I almost become like competitive with it. You know what I mean? It's like, how do I change like my profile or the way I'm engaging with it to actually like, Hinge says it's something like, the app made to be deleted. And I hope they're honestly going for that. You know what I mean?
There's no fucking way.
It's, well, and it's funny because in a lot of like my personal kind of philosophy and orientation, like I don't hate on capitalism as much as other people do. Like I get it, like business, like whatever. But when it comes to this subject, I become such a social justice advocate. I'm like, how dare you, mess with people's dating lives and sex lives in this way? Like appalling. It's absolutely appalling. And yeah,
it feels really personal, doesn't it? Like you're being vulnerable, putting yourself out there on these dating apps, and there's an algorithm that these companies, these tech bros have created in order to serve you up just enough good matches to keep you coming on and to like keep the really amazing matches behind a paywall. So you have to like pay extra tokens or roses or whatever it is in order to like talk to the people that maybe are the best matches for you. Like, I get it. They're a business that's trying to make money. They have investors that are hounding them. I don't feel bad for them, but I understand why that model exists and what the purpose of it is. But like, you're messing with my love. And like, I don't get to meet certain people because the algorithm isn't working for me. And Hinge or any other dating app, like, you will be rewarded in those dating apps if you engage a lot. If you're an enthusiastic dating app user, then you'll like meet more people there. But if you're using the app and you're just like, okay, this is a necessary evil and I hate this, then you're going to be served up very little matches, or maybe matches with people that are just like, this is dumb and I don't want to engage with it either, which only reinforces how you already feel about the apps. So part of the book is just like, all right, how can you game the system? If they're looking you, if the dating apps want you to engage, then engage. And when you can't do it, get the fuck off the dating apps and then get back on when you're feeling more like resilient or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a really, really good insight. Something I talk to my patients about is I say, remember that attraction is the five senses plus one. So it's like, yeah, you ought to like how they look, but I like how a lot of them have incorporated the voice note feature, because it's like, yeah, if you think their voice is annoying, you are not going to be attracted to them. Like, sorry, and it's not that their voice is bad or yours is good. It's just, it's about fit, right? And it really isn't until you can meet someone in person. I mean, I think don't we know that a lot of attraction is just smell and it's unconscious anyways? And so I don't know how that gets translated. I mean, even if, there's only so many senses that can be digitized.
Yeah, there's actually not that much criteria that can be digitized, like beyond your height and your age and your political whatever. There's like a lot of like the things that they can capture on these dating apps don't actually matter when it comes to like a healthy, good, successful, secure relationship. And you're right. A lot of it is just like about vibe and gut check and just like in-person compatibility and banter. So there's a lot of work that you have to put into those dating apps in order to find somebody who could be a good match for you. And that's why meeting in real life tends to work out a little better, I think.
Yeah. I love the comment about height. A dear, dear friend of mine just started seeing someone very seriously that she really, really adores. It feels very serious. And when she was telling me about him, one of the first things she said, thank goodness I met him in person, because he's 5'9". And my cutoff was always 5'10", even though she's like 5'3". You know what I mean? Like, she couldn't be happier. And it was a good reminder for me, because I obviously have height preferences on those things as well. You know what I mean? Like, I am also guilty of this. And it's like, yeah, and for the, for the right vibe, for the right person, for the right, spark even, some of those things just don't really matter.
Exactly. I think, what is it like? Yeah. Only 11% of men are 6 feet or over. So if your height requirement is 6 feet, goodbye, 89% of men. Like, what the fuck is going on here? You know what I mean? So yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So that's the dating app piece. Talk to me about this. So you meet someone you like. What are some of the common things that have been coming up for people once the interest in courtship has been initiated, let's say?
I think a lot of people talk about like, when do you define the relationship? Or even before that, let's put a pin in that. An interesting like question that people struggle with is like, when do you like speak up about your needs and wants and expectations, even if you haven't defined the relationship yet, even if it's just like the very early stage of dates between like dates 2 and 10 or something, where it's like maybe nothing's quite defined, you're still getting to know each other, you're feeling a little let down, or like specifically, one of the most common questions I get is, hey, I met somebody and we have really good energy and banter when we hang out in person. We love it. But in between dates, I never hear from them. They're not texting. They're not sending emojis. I get like no memes or whatever. Like, and that makes me feel really disconnected. It makes me feel like they don't really like me very much. However, I don't want to like say anything about this, and I should be like the real chill person where it's just like I'm going with the flow and not asking for any sort of reassurance or validation or checking in or whatever. So the internet is, a little divided on this. I'm usually kind of like, just speak up, just ask for what you want. And if it's just like, text me a little bit more, or how are you feeling about this? You might as well put that out there. Because I'm like of the belief that if somebody likes you, they want you to know that they like you. That like they like you, so they want you to feel good. So they're gonna appreciate a little blueprint about like how they can make you feel good about the connection that they have with you. But so often there's so many people that are just like, no, you should really just kind of like be super chill and clam up and not ask for your needs to be met. And it goes into the like, have you ever heard the if he wanted to, he would, or if they wanted to, they would.
Right.
Yeah. Like if they really liked you, they would show it and it would be super obvious. And that's a really black and white way to think. And if that's the way you want to do it, because you're looking for really black and white signals, then do that, buddy. Like that's totally fine. But there's probably a lot of like gray and nuance that you're missing. And just because somebody isn't texting you a lot, it doesn't mean that they're not head over heels for you. There can be a million reasons why they're not doing it. So that's something.
Yeah, totally. I also, it's black and white, but it's also reminding me of this, this term from the trauma literature, over accommodation. So like if you're doing cognitive processing therapy, and I'm not saying that someone that has this reaction is working through a trauma response. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm kind of copy and pasting and just riffing here. But the idea is that if someone starts to assign way more control to others or to the universe or to whatever it is than is actually balanced, it's like that's a way for you to kind of soothe your own anxiety. Right. And so the idea that it's like, oh, well, if they wanted to, they just would, maybe, or, like maybe if you reminded them, maybe if you sent them a little ping, or, I often find myself as the kind of like the chaser in a lot of ways. Like that's where I feel the most comfortable. And I love it when someone else is doing that, because it's just so new and amazing, and it's just that almost captures my attention more than feeling like I'm quote unquote like catching you, or whatever I'm doing is working in terms of us communicating. So
exactly. Yeah. And I think a big part of the book, well, actually the subtitle of the book is How to Create Lasting Love by Tapping into Your Authentic Self. So a lot of the book, I keep on coming back to like, how can you just be authentically you? If you want to say, can you please text me more, or how you feeling about me, then just be congruent with who you really are. We're kind of banking on you being your authentic self is probably the most attractive, is when you're the most attractive, when you're just being like the real version of you. And if somebody else doesn't find that attractive, then cool, bad match. Not for you then, I guess, So a lot of the like stages of relationship, whatever I'm going through, is like, how can you tap in to your authenticity, which can be tricky. Because like at the beginning of the book, I talk about like, we're told to be a certain way when it comes to dating and relationships and how to show up in love and stuff like that. So yeah, there's that. And then I go into like the defining the relationship part. There's usually a lot of anxiety around like nailing down that little cutie of yours and actually like officially becoming like a couple, if that's what you're looking for, and then talking about what type of relationship style you want and being really upfront about that. There's also like I'm interested in what you might think about this. When you have the like defining the relationship talk, and maybe you're like both excited and you agree that you're a couple now or whatever. One of the things I want you all to talk about is, if you break up, how do you want me to do that? Because more often than not, you're most likely the relationship's going to come to an end, but you're like riding a high right now. You think that may never happen if you're looking for like a long-term relationship. Okay, fine. Like get into those honeymoon feelings. We love it. But if it does end, it's a really good, nice little like blueprint of how somebody wants you to break up. So I'm going to say, I'd rather you text me if you want to have a breakup with me. I'd rather you do it on a Friday before dinner, so that like we don't go out Friday night and I can have the whole weekend to recover. I'd like you to give me the option, actually. Like, text me so that I can tell you if I want to continue texting you, if we should hop on the phone or a FaceTime or talk in person. Like, I want to consent to, like, what kind of breakup it's going to be, you know, if I have that, if it makes sense for me to consent to it. And now you have this little guideline of, like, how to break up with me if we ever end the relationship. Because eventually, if you do have to end the relationship, it's very hard to do that. It's one of the hardest things to do. To be broken up with is just horrible. It feels really bad. The grief is incredibly powerful. And there's a lot of, like, I don't know how to do it. I don't know. Or, like, there's a lot of, like, I want to be a good breaker-upper, but I don't know how to be a good breaker-upper to this person. Anyways, have you ever talked about how to break up with you in a relationship? Do you think that's a good thing to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I feel ambivalent about doing it, you know, right after you kind of label something, but I do think it could be a good conversation to have at some point. And for anyone listening, I mean, and you feel free to push back on this, but it could even be like, you know, if I ever have to deliver bad news to you, you know, like actually maybe a little, make it more, a little more artfully fake. Because I know for me, it's like, you know, I would love it on that Friday personally, you know, but then I also know that one time I did break up with someone on a Friday because I wanted to give them the weekend to do whatever they need to do, whether it's,
Very
you know,
kind.
cry in bed or go out or
Right.
whatever it is. And they could not stop talking about the fact that I ruined the weekend. And I was just like, well, I mean, were we going to hang out all weekend and maybe you sent something as wrong, or I don't know. I mean, there really isn't a good way to do it. So I overall like having the conversation because there's not a good way to do it. I really like that you're at least figuring out a way to make it slightly less painful because it's going to hurt no matter what.
No matter what. And also, like, the other important questions of, like, can we find out if we're on the same page or close to the same page when it comes to what do you think cheating is? What do I think cheating is? Is flirting with the barista cheating? Is making a new dog friend without you cheating? Is cuddling with a buddy cheating? Like, there's like so many different types of definitions of physical cheating or emotional cheating. There's also, like, what do you keep private, right? Like, are you going to do you want my access to my phone? Are you expecting that? Do you want to track me on your device? Do you want the read receipts turned on when we're texting? Or, like, what if an ex texts me and I'm just like, no, I'm not interested because they want to get back together? Do you want to know that? Do you want me to tell you if my mom thinks your job is dumb? Like, there's like, obviously you're not going to be able to, like, work out all of these things at the beginning, but you can get a general vibe because a lot of times these are things that, like, send people into couples counseling. And I love couples counseling, but there's things that you can work out before. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And what you think you might want, it's anyone listening to this, it's give yourself permission to experiment a little bit because what you think you might want might not be what actually feels right in the moment. And what you want isn't always what you need, you know? And so it can be very hard to tell. It could also depend on the relationship and on the personality. I mean, I think of people I've been with in my past, and some of them, it's like, I loved their direct feedback. I needed it. And then others, it was like, could you say it a different way, please? Like, you know? And so it may not be the same relationship to relationship.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you know, like any relationship book that a therapist writes, it's like, I just can't stop saying, like, please communicate. Just talk, you know? And a lot of my, like, content with all those lists are me prompting you to talk to each other, you know? And one of the, like, surprisingly, you know, like, if I'm in Portland, Oregon, and there's a lot of, like, you know, my demographic of the people that follow my content, a lot of them a lot of those folks like live in Portland, and so I'll get noticed every now and then. And one of the like the surprising things that I like hear most of the time is like women coming up to me being like, "Oh my God, thank you so much for your content. If it wasn't for your content, I would have never broken up with my boyfriend." So a lot of like, "Thanks, you ended my relationship" sort of compliments.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, where there's like, "Oh, I did talk to my boyfriend and it turns out we're not a good match." And I was able to clearly see that. Or you modeled what a healthy relationship would look like or what good communication looks like. And well, that clearly wasn't happening here. So I got out of the relationship. So I think, so that's not my like intent usually with like the videos or the book that I wrote. But a lot of times that's what people get out of it so they can like be more clear about what they're looking for in their next relationship.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, it's the word that keeps coming up for me as you're talking is it's like, be authentic. Yes. But why do you want to be authentic and be congruent? It's to find your fit. It's to find your match, because the only thing worse than not getting together with this person you really like is getting together anyways and trying to make it work. And you're both just pulling your hair out because you want different things.
Exactly. And then you end up like avoiding uncomfortable conversations or making compromises that you don't quite feel great about. And then like this resentment and contempt builds and builds. And we know those are horrible things to happen in relationships. So yeah, just like get it all out there as quickly as you can. And like you kind of said, like understand that like things also change. We grow. And sometimes when we're in relationships, we grow and become even closer because of it, or we grow and evolve in slightly different ways that still leave space for a good relationship, or maybe not so much, or it's a little disjointed for a year or two, but then you kind of like come back together, but you're like talking the whole time and communicating. There's just, you know, like it's a cliche, but and I'm not sure if it's always 100% true when couples come in and see me, but usually they're saying like, we're coming in because we need to learn how to communicate better. And it's like, yes, of course you do. And there's also a bunch of other shit that's probably going on here, but we could start with communication if you want. Yeah.
Yeah. You talked about breaking up correctly. What's your opinion on the internet has a term for it? It's kind of like where you start grieving the relationship like a couple months before you break up, but you don't tell your partner. What is that called? Do you know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, it's like a pre-grief sort of stage. What is it called? I think there is a specific name for it, but
I think there is too.
I don't think whatever the name is for it, I don't think that it should include the word grief, because I don't think you can actually grieve somebody until the relationship is done. And then you like experience the impact of what it is to not be with them. I think that there can be like plenty of sadness that can be processed and contemplation of what it would be like if we weren't together. Fine, that makes sense. But I don't like, I think a lot of people think that like if they pre-grieve the relationship, then they're setting themselves up for a less griefy outcome, when I don't think that's true at all, actually. You don't really like understand the impact of how horrible it might be, how powerful the grief might be until you're actually out of it. I don't know. That's what I think. What do you think?
I think that that's right. And I think that's right because I know that I've glanced at this like health psychology literature where it was like looking at like, you know, like the grieving process, like if you like your family member dies very slowly versus like if it's a surprise, and like basically like there is no correlation. Like, you know what I mean? Like your feelings are going to be your feelings. And so I think that makes perfect sense. That's how processing the termination of a relationship would be.
Yeah, I think it's like it's a nice sort of convenient like thing to believe in, of like, oh, you know, I'm like getting ready to end the relationship. It's not going to be as hard when it actually ends, which isn't quite it. But you might also be like delaying the inevitable, like you're not being in the book. I talk about like how can you be brave and have these hard conversations and be straightforward about ending the relationship in a compassionate way. But that's a really difficult conversation to have. And a lot of times we're trying to like it there's like it's the feeling that I get whenever I like want to end a relationship. I'm just like, okay, tonight I can either end it and feel absolutely horrible, or I can have a fun date night. And it's so hard not to just be like, I'm not going to break up today. It's going to be next weekend because I'm just going to like enjoy our time together. You can like keep on making that decision forever, right? But that's where it gets into like, this doesn't feel very ethical. And you're holding your partner back, and obviously yourself, from like being with somebody who would be a better match, right? So it's best to just do it as quickly as possible, but it's hard to do.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your opinion on the following? So I've noticed this pattern come up with, people I work with clinically, like loved ones. We kind of share our journey of love, if you will. Is that there seems to be this recurring theme of what's a good example? He's having a busy season at work. He isn't, there for me like he once was. And this is so hard. And of course it's hard. I'm not making, not to sound like a total, stereotypical shrink. I'm not making it wrong. I'm just noticing, that it's difficult. And the thing that keeps coming up for me is, would you be feeling this way if you had already been together for a couple of years? Because if you're with someone for a couple of years or a decade or whatever, and they have like a half a year period where it's like their focus is work, they're writing a book, they're building a company, they're training for the marathon, like whatever it is, like they have other goals in their life. Of course, you're going to feel hurt and neglected. It seems to me that when that happens early on, because life happens early on, stuff comes up, people have other goals and ambitions, that is really what makes it painful for the partner that's feeling neglected. And for me, I can't help but wonder, well, how fast is too fast? If you've been dating someone for, let's say, 3 months, 6 months, and then they enter a 3 or 6 month time period where their focus is going to primarily be on something else, I don't know. I don't even quite know how to articulate the question, but my curiosity is about, particularly people that are more anxiously attached, or kind of one of those things. How do you think about that problem?
It's a tricky one. I mean, obviously it depends on the person, yada, yada. But I think I would try to like encourage that person who's feeling a little anxiously attached in that moment to kind of like take a step back and be like, do you want to be with somebody who has like other shit going on, who has other interests, who can like do something and then bring it back into the relationship and talk about it? Is that an attractive thing to like see somebody in their like passion, creating something that's really important to them, working on something that defines who they are? Like, is that a sexy thing? I think it's a sexy thing, but I mean, like, so you probably want like a well-rounded person. And like you're saying, like presenting them with like, what if it was like this 2 years in, 10 years in? Would you be celebrating them being the best cheerleader possible, trying to figure out how to like support them through this? And like we all want to be like the main character in our movie, right? But sometimes you're gonna have to play like the supporting role in your relationship, and so now you're like moving into the supporting role, and you wish you weren't doing it 3 months in. I wish you weren't doing it 3 months in. That sucks. There's like a lot of, I don't know, connection, honeymoony time that you're missing out on, possibly, whatever. But like, if we take a step back, this is a really good sign, maybe. And if you're not the priority, then it shows that they could be more well-rounded, I think. They're not like burning down their whole life just to spend every second with you. That's hot. That's sexy. But if you don't think it's hot, and you think that it might be a clue to a larger pattern of like you always being secondary or not being the most, then like that's your call, I guess. And maybe you have to have like conversations. I wish, you know what I wish? I wish that person could talk to like the last 5 exes of the person that they're dating. Like, is this a fucking pattern? What's going on here? I don't know if that's a good idea at all. I just thought of that now, but good info, I think.
No, well, it wasn't I wasn't thinking of this when I asked the question, but I remember being at a party and there was this person from the Bay Area there, and their whole thing was like they want to date the CEO or someone like equivalent. Like that is like they are not going to settle for anything less than that. And then they were simultaneously bitching about how these guys are always rescheduling dates, always like prioritizing work and like all these things. And I remember, and it was one of those times, I don't know if this happens to you, where it's like, I wasn't trying to be a therapist. I wasn't trying to like instill insight. It was just obvious to me. And I was just like, well, but like this, you have to take the good with the bad, right? Like I was just like, there is no advantage without a disadvantage. Like, yeah, that's incredibly sexy. I agree that like dating the CEO is like sexy or like whatever. It was like, and they're gonna be busy, you know? And I just remember I could hear like a sitcom, just like the glass shattering. And it was just like, what do you actually want? And so that actually leads me to another question I wanted to ask you. What do you tell people? Because yes, like be authentic, you know, yes, be congruent, yes, find your fit, all those things, but it's also very difficult to know what you actually want and need. And like I said earlier, sometimes what you think you want to need, you then experience it. Like I think a lot of people, you know, they find, you know, like an open relationship, like very sexy. And then they encounter the jealousy and insecurity that accompanies it. And it's like, oh, never mind, you know, which is good data to know about yourself, but it does take experimentation a little bit, I think.
Yeah, there's the rub. I mean, I got married when I was 30, 31. And I was in that marriage. I was getting like exactly what I wanted and what I needed. I mean, not 100%, but a lot of what I wanted and I needed is what I was getting in that relationship. It was stable, it was secure, it was drama-free, it was consistent, it was cute, it was sweet, it was funny. You know, like there's like all these wonderful things that I got in the relationship that authentically I wanted and I was in alignment with and that she wanted as well. And then we divorced 7 years later because like our authentic needs and desires and wants changed. And it wasn't her fault or my fault. It's just sort of like what happens in relationship. And I don't look at that marriage as a failure or something that I'm ashamed of. I loved being married to her. She was such a good partner. And she's going to be an even better partner to somebody else who's going to be a better match for her in this next phase of life. And I'm going to find somebody who's a better match for me in my next phase of life. And I also don't want to fucking get married again. There's just like something about the legal contract of it all, and the societal pressure of it all made it so that like for time there, I felt guilty. I felt ashamed. I didn't feel good. I felt like a failure of a therapist or, you know, as a couples counselor, right? Getting divorced. That's so embarrassing. I'm like a relationship advocate that helps people stay together and I can't even do that for my own marriage. What the hell? Right. But it made sense and it made me even more in touch with what I authentically wanted in this phase of life. And with my next partner, maybe it'll be a really long forever relationship, or maybe it'll be like an amazing 1.5 year relationship. So I want to be a little bit more like flowy and fluid. There's something to be said though. There's been like, I used to get like a lot of questions from journalists being like, all you fucking like people out there like asking for your needs to be met or boundaries to be made or expectations to be had. What about like the quote unquote good old days where like you just got together and stayed together forever? And even if you had opposite and opposing political beliefs and values, you just didn't fucking talk about it, right? And I was like, I don't know if that serves you, but that sounds shitty to me, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. So it's hard to like figure out what you authentically want unless you're going through relationships and figuring that out and like leaving space to change and allowing your partner to change. And then, you know, maybe you'll have 3 to 5 really significant, important, long-ish term relationships. And I love that for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think my reply to the people, you know, the good old days, I'm very fond. So like one of my biggest influences, this is one of my opening questions to you, you know, is Eric Fromm, you know, The Art of Loving. And you read even just the first couple of pages and you can't even believe that he wrote this like in the 50s, because this is like pre-internet, like pre-dating apps, like pre-sexual revolution, like you know, like gays becoming socially acceptable. It's like pre so many things. And it's like, it's the exact same freaking problems, you know? And so whenever people, you know, have nostalgia, I sometimes think about that book and how that was my reaction to it, because I think that's one of the things that makes it such a valuable read. And I think it's like, yeah, like there are advantages to doing it that way for sure. I really do believe in the adage of with every weakness, there's a strength and vice versa, right? But to think that, oh, it was so much simpler back then, I'm not totally sure. I don't buy it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was. Maybe it was more suppressed back then, just to a certain degree, or. But yeah, I think there was like the same issues and problems back then as there is now. I mean, these are just like normal, typical relationship problems.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's hard. And, with, I sometimes feel that way when I have relationship failures. It's like, there's this weird pressure. It's like, oh, like, but I'm a therapist. And at least for me, what my loved ones have reminded me of, it's like, yeah. And like, how are your cases going? Like, are your couples, like, are they falling in love again? And it's like, yeah, like, you're a great therapist. And like, why is therapy like so, beneficial? It's like, I'm completely objective. I'm compassionate, but attached. I have no skin in this game. I'm not going to get upset and worked up. Like, I'm just thinking of some couples I've worked with. It's like, I'm not going to get pulled into this fight with you. Like, I don't like in the most, in the most compassionate way possible. It's like, I don't care. You know what I mean? Like this out, like, this is your fight. Like, I am here to help you, put it together, or like we can, do whatever we need to do. But I think that that reframe has always really helped me, because, when you're in it, or like the thing I normalize with patients all the time is I say, listen, like, you think, like, I'm a well-adjusted person. My mom only has to say one thing. You know what I mean? And I completely, like, I don't even recognize myself. Or like, if I miss lunch for some, unforeseen reason, I can't even give therapy until I have a snack. Like, I am not myself, And so it's just like, to you and to anyone else listening, it's like, take it easy on yourself. I think you're going to be okay. Take it easy.
Yeah. But it's such a weird, there's like, we put this pressure on ourselves as like being therapists or couples counselors and being whatever it means to be like successful relationships or whatever, never getting a divorce. I don't know. But then there's this like funny added pressure that like, sure, I'm a therapist. And now I'm also like whatever you want to call it, a wellness lifestyle content creator, a wellness lifestyle influencer. I don't know. And like, as somebody like that, you really want to, there's a part of me that really wants to like be like, I am perfectly healthy. There is nothing wrong with me. You can count on me. No skeletons in my closet. Like, what was it, like a month or so ago, with Jonathan Van Ness, JVN, like there was that Rolling Stone article about them of like, oh my God, they're a monster on set and they're yelling at the staff and they're such a diva or whatever. And they've hurt so many people. And it's like, it's hard to like integrate that for some people, because they're like, no, JVN is my like inspiration and they're so amazing and sweet on Queer Eye. Like, I can't see them that way. But like, I don't know, that's not too far. I get why JVN might be that way. Like, JVN is dramatic and kind of a diva, and so it's okay, right? Like, that makes sense to me. I don't care. But I think like JVN then has to figure out, like, do they respond to this publicly? Do they just apologize privately? Have they already done that? And there's like lots of people in the comment section after that was revealed being like, you need to say something. What is wrong with you? So anyways, an added pressure of like, if you're going to create content online, you also have to be perfect and make sure that like everything that you do is impeccable. And that's not true for my life. And it's scary.
Oh, totally. I mean, this is inspiring me to just engage in some protest behavior this coming weekend and just remind everyone, It's like, I'm just like you. Content creators, they're just like you.
Exactly. Yeah. But they're putting you up, putting us up, putting all of them up on a pedestal, and they're dehumanizing you. Like, they're making you into like not a person. And then there's no way. And if you're a client that's doing that to me as your therapist, I can work with that in therapy. It's a completely normal thing that you're doing to me. I get to like influence how you're thinking, talk to you about all your feelings about that. What a weird experience, normalize it. But I don't get to talk to my millions of followers who are doing that to me. And there'll be like a long fall from grace or something. So it's just like, I don't know how we got on this topic, but I think it's like an interesting part
Yeah.
of doing this, you know?
Yeah. And it's actually really great to be reminded that when people read your book, it's not just the influencer, the content creator, the person with the brand, the person with the private practice, the therapist. It's also like the person who has, like loved and lost, who's like been
Right.
on the journey, because as much as people might idealize different kind of public figures, there's also this sense of it's like, but I also want to feel like I can relate to you. And I think that you have, in the stuff you've just shared today, has done just that. As we wrap up here, how can people find you if they're not familiar with you already? Where can they buy your book, which I'm very, very excited to read? And we'll have to have you on next season after I've read the book and we can double click on any and all of these topics.
Yeah, for sure. You can find me at Therapy Jeff on TikTok and Instagram. You can listen to my podcasts. I have two of them. One of them is called Big Dating Energy, which is the name of my book. The other one is called Problem Solved, where I like get deeper into trying to like solve issues that people are experiencing in their relationships. You can buy my book now at Amazon or Barnes and Noble or at my website, therapyjeff.com. Leaving me comments, sliding into my DMs, letting me know how wonderful I am is always helpful. Giving me good reviews. Do whatever you need to do. I want to get, the validation.
All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.